Yeah, that's right. It's another public charging rant. I know that you know things need to change, so do make sure that you've filled out the ongoing government consultation that my last video covered. If you've got no idea what I'm talking about, there's a link to that video in the description. Please do check it out. In this video, I want to talk about pre-authorisation when you try to use a public charger. That's a hold on funds in your bank account that's placed by the vendor in an attempt to make sure they get paid for what you're going to take from them. Before you start in the comments, I fully understand why this occurs. Pre-authorisation itself is not what's got me all worked up. It's a vital part of the payment infrastructure. I get it, okay? The people that provide the infrastructure need to get paid for the service they're providing. I understand that. What does smart a little though, is that remember the failed charge I had at Ecotricity at Gloucester Services South? Almost a month ago now. If you haven't seen that video, again, check it out. They pre-authorised £12 when I went to start that charge, and it failed. And they still haven't actually cleared that yet. They still effectively at least have control of my £12. I know they don't have the money, but they're still holding it. My bank will automatically refund that money in the next couple of days because they haven't claimed it or refunded it. But it's taken the full month, which is the statutory timeout period for that. This isn't another Ecotricity bashing video. Holding on to my funds for a month when they could have reversed the pre-authorisation the same day isn't necessarily the point here. I want to talk about all of the public charging networks and their approach to this exact issue. Bear in mind, if you go to a pay-at-pump petrol station, like at Tesco or Asda for example, they'll pre-authorise £1 on your card. That's right, £1. For your £1, they'll let you draw up to £99 worth of fuel generally. By far the worst offender in the EV charging space is Ionity. If you aren't aware of Ionity, they're establishing rapid charging at various key locations across the UK and Europe. They're rather famous actually for their headline grabbing rate of 69p per kilowatt hour. That's right, double what their competitors charge, who you probably already think are quite expensive. It's rather outrageous. But I understand the reasoning behind it, you see. Ionity don't actually want you as a customer if you're going to walk up with your credit or debit card and expect to charge. They want you to be driving an Audi e-tron, a Mercedes EQC, or a Ford Mustang Mach-E or something like that, where the manufacturer has formed a partnership with them. And you've signed up to the manufacturer's charging program where you get a huge discount in return for a monthly subscription. Should you be needing to use one of their chargers though, and have the audacity to pay the walk-up rate of 69p per kilowatt hour, they'll happily let you do so. Fair enough. They'll place a small pre-authorisation on your card to make sure your card's valid and they've got a chance of getting paid. A tiny little £67. No, really, £67. Even if the charge fails to start, you're £67 in the hole. The next attempt will pre-authorise the same. Of course it is pre-authorisation. They don't actually have your £67, but you can't spend that money either. Particularly problematic if you're using a debit card to pay. Multiples of £67 of your actual hard-earned cash are now tied up in the banking system because you dared to try and use their hugely overpriced charger to complete your journey, and that charger wasn't necessarily working. 2, 3 attempts to start a charge later, and it's getting pretty serious, right? I've bought entire running, driving cars for less than the £210 that you now can't spend. A tank of petrol or diesel barely costs the £67 they're pre-authorising. I mean, to add insult to injury here, even at their hugely expensive 69p per kilowatt hour, £67 is loads. It's nearly 100 kilowatt hours worth of charging. You could fully charge the biggest battery EVs on the market. That would be the Tesla Model S or Model X 100D with a 100 kilowatt hour battery for that 67 quid. Your average EV, something like an MG ZS EV or a Nissan Leaf, we need about 40 kilowatts to charge from very, very nearly empty. That'd be about £27 worth, even at Ionity's stupid rates. It's absolutely absurd. Maybe it's their way of discouraging you from using their network completely. It certainly puts me off. Of course, the hassle-free way to charge your car for a lot cheaper is at home, if you can. I use Octopus Energy to supply my home electricity, and on their Go tariff, where there's cheap electricity overnight, I can charge for 5 pence per kilowatt hour, just 7% of the cost of charging at Ionity. There's a link in the description. If you use it to switch your energy supply to Octopus, we'd both get £50 credit, which will help you get started on your first bill, and it'll help me keep the wheels turning. I'd be hugely appreciative if you wanted to use it. Next up, BP Pulse, formerly known as ChargeMaster, probably one of the bigger public charging networks you'll almost certainly have heard of for various reasons. They're another network where they have a subscription kind of model. If you want to pay £7.85 a month, you can access cheap charging rates and they'll bill you monthly and all that kind of stuff. If you decide to use contactless, they'll pre-authorise a whopping £30 if you're using the 150 kilowatt chargers, enough to pay for 71 kilowatt hours at 42 pence per kilowatt hour, which is their walk-up rate. More than enough to charge all but the biggest batteries. If you use one of their 50 kilowatt chargers, they'll pre-authorise £15 at 30 pence per kilowatt hour. Again, enough for 50 kilowatt hours. Don't know why there's a big disparity there. Maybe they're assuming you'll have a bigger battery if you're paying for the faster chargers. Chances are, though, you're just paying for what's available. If you need to use one of their chargers and it's 150 kilowatt, just use it. You're not going to look for another one if you need to charge. And they're not alone. Their oil company-owned brethren, Shell Recharge, they're not much better. They'll pre-authorise £20 on your card, enough for 51 kilowatt hours at 39 pence per kilowatt hour, which is their walk-up rate. And it just seems a bit over the top, doesn't it? And that moves us on to Ecotricity, who in this context almost seem reasonable. They'll pre-authorise £12, as I said before. They'll hang on to it a month if your charge fails, but hey-ho. That's enough for about 40 kilowatt hours at the 30 pence rate. So, you know, actually in line with what you'd need for a good charge of a typical EV. I mean, a really good sort of empty to full type charge. But for once, Ecotricity actually come out of this looking okay. If they were a bit quicker at giving you your money back should the charge fail, £12, it's not too bad. It's not £67, is it? As usual then, we're left with the two networks that seem to be doing pretty much everything just right. Both InstaVolt and Osprey will pre-authorise £5 if you start a charge using a contactless card. Now that's not an amount so significant that I'd worry about it too much. If it fails once or twice, that's 14 kilowatt hours worth more or less at their rates. I think InstaVolt charged 35p, Osprey charged 36. I'd rather it was the £1 that shows parity with the petrol stations, but it's definitely nowhere near as offensive, is it? That to me is a level where they're protecting their interests, protecting their business. They'll be able to get the payment from you, but they're not taking things too far. And it certainly cements their place with me as networks that should be the go-to option. Let me know what you think in the comments. Most of the providers' features let you work around some of these issues, right? You can subscribe to them, you can use their app where they'll bill you for your usage. I know that Osprey definitely do that. If you start a charge using their app, there isn't a pre-authorisation as such because you have an account with them and they'll bill you for your usage. But then like Ecotricity, you need to use their app and they still pre-authorise £12 on your card. And not all of them give you these workarounds. And I think it creates real problems if you couple these charging mechanisms with dodgy chargers that fail to start. And if you're racking up these pre-authorisations, you know, maybe if you're using a credit card, you won't worry about it too much. But if you're using a debit card and it's a bit close to payday and there's not that much left in the account, you know, and we've all been there. A couple of failed charges at 67 quid each, and that could be the difference between you managing to buy some groceries just at the end of the month, right? And I just don't think it's good enough. I think there needs to be some reform here. And I didn't see a huge mention of this in the government consultation when they talked about payment methods. They certainly talked about standardising payment methods and charging methods in terms of, paying pence per kilowatt hour and that kind of stuff. But I don't think these pre-authorizations were particularly mentioned. So if you're yet to fill out that consultation, you might well want to mention this. I think there should be a cap on this. I think that we should allow these companies to protect their interest, but I don't think they should be allowed to do it to the extent that they currently are. If I can fill up a tank of petrol with them pre-authorising £1 and they're fairly confident that they're going to get paid for that, I don't see why EV charging networks should be any different in that regard. If they need to up their security, if they need cameras, ANPR, etc. to work out who you are should your car bounce, then that's what they need to do. Like I say, let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.